Hey everybody, what's going on? Happy Wednesday and welcome to week 5. That's right, we're already 5 weeks in, almost a third of the way through this NFL season. Welcome to DFS Pick 6, RotoWorld's DFS Pick 6 presented by RotoGrinders. I'm Eric Crane, joined of course by Evan Silva and Rich Rebar. Reeves, how we doing today, buddy?
Man, I'm doing real good. I told you on the way in, I just missed a big week. Late in the week, I pivoted to Andrew Luck late in the week thanks to what Evan had on the show, and kind of went back to even what I wrote in the worksheet and said, man, why am I not playing more Andrew Luck? And he popped off. But you know what would have pushed me over the hump, right?
I tried, man.
If I'd have put some Corey Davis in some lineups, man.
Yeah, I tried, brother. I tried. Everybody laughed at me. I mean, I literally got laughed at. I'm not gonna lie, it was hurtful. Like it's like I told you guys, I have exactly one skill in life, and that's finding good weeks from receivers that are in crap spots. And I tried to give you guys a gift, an early Christmas gift, a Halloween gift, and you laughed at me. And honestly, it hurt my feelings. Evan Silva, can you believe that you guys hurt my feelings like that?
I mean, that's what you get for watching the games. If you watch Marcus Mariota's week 3 game, there was no way that you were touching any player in the Titans offense. So don't watch the games and you'll be better off.
All right. That's my new plan. I'm not going to watch any games. And I'll tell you what, this week was actually the first week I've got to sit down and watch all the games. The first week that I didn't get drugged to a winery or some family function. Not that I don't like my family functions, but let's be honest. Sundays are for football. Sundays are for the boys. So we got all the way up to NFL week 5. And once again, we've got some massive totals on the slate. And Reeves, we saw in week 4, man, like the high scoring just keeps coming.
Yeah, I mean, all the core games we talked about last week just went bananas. I mean, you look at that, like Atlanta. I don't know what order we have the games in tonight, but like the Atlanta situation, their defensive situation is just so poor, and their offense is so good. It's just turned into just a spot to smash. They just played 3 games at home. Like now we're gonna finally get them on the road. In a house where like the Steelers just put up buckets of points usually, and they did it on Sunday night. Ben kind of got it going at the end of that first half last week, and it was like, all right, the second half this game's really going to ramp up, and then he just did. He was horrible the second half of that game, and they did absolutely nothing. But yeah, I mean the scoring isn't stopping. We got some monster totals on the docket already. I mean that Atlanta Pittsburgh game is going to go through the roof, and obviously everyone's going to talk about that. We're going to talk about it, but yeah, the season keeps rolling on with all the high scoring and the passing production.
Yeah, Evan, we've kind of seen it this year. Like these totals are starting to get bigger and bigger week in and week out. Vegas can't seem to make them big enough. I mean, hell, the Browns and the Raiders nearly put up 90 the other day. Like it was just unbelievable, Evan. Like are the offenses are they innovating enough to where the defense are having trouble catching up, or what's the reason for this?
I mean, it's not one reason. It's multiple reasons. First of all, on the week 5 slate, we have 6 games with totals of 50 or more, and we have 2 more with totals that are at 49. So it's likely to be another high scoring week. I mean, I think it's a bunch of different reasons. It's the rules. It's, an influx of young quarterback talent. It is, getting back all the quarterbacks that got injured last year. It is teams embracing more passing. Teams are throwing the ball more than ever. It's a bunch of different reasons, and it's not just one that you can put your finger on. It's the league itself encouraging the scoring because they know that that's what's good for the game. That's what people want.
Yeah, I really am enjoying like the different GIFs on Twitter and the memes on Twitter about how what's pass interference, can you do to sack a quarterback. It's a lot of fun. Check it out if you haven't. But let's go ahead and jump into the first game because it is one of the highest totals I can remember seeing. I think it might be the highest total since we started doing this show. Atlanta at Pittsburgh, total of 58. Pittsburgh 3-point favorites. And Reeves, I mean, I know we kind of talked about these massive totals, but a 58-point total in a week 5 game is just absurd.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Atlanta's last 3 games, they were 55, 80, and 73 at home, totals.
That's a lot.
Those are big numbers. And I mean, they can't stop anyone. The middle of their defense has been gutted. They lost their defensive tackle. Grady Jarrett is not going to play in this game either. it's just going to be a bloodbath again. And I mean, the Steelers have gotten off to like their typical like Steelerish type start where they look hot and then they don't. They kind of play down, and you've had some of those games already. But this is still an offense you want attachment to, and they're an offense that can definitely exploit this Atlanta defense. So I mean, we're going to be real excited about this matchup in totality. If you look at just fantasy points generated for each of these teams for their skill players, Atlanta ranks 9th, Pittsburgh ranks 4th. In points allowed to the opposition in the same category, Atlanta ranks 30th, Pittsburgh ranks 28th. I mean, everything is set up for this to be, just a circular, no punting, touchdown, back and forth type of game. The problem we're going to run into outside of, game stacking this game for tournament play is everyone here is expensive. They know you want to play everyone in this game. Everyone except for a couple guys that we'll probably have to hash out, but all the core guys are really tough to fit in to lineups at this stage because they know you want to play everyone here.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try and get Julio and Antonio Brown with these quarterbacks in there, good luck. I mean, it's definitely worth trying to do, but it's really difficult this week. Evan, you know who is really cheap?
Mohamed Sanu.
You're damn right it's Mohamed Sanu. He's sitting down there at 4K over on DK. I mean, he's getting targets. I don't know if I'm not going to get too excited about Mohamed Sanu, but Evan, like Reeves was saying, man, this game is just primed for a big boy score.
Yeah, last week was actually Mohamed Sanu's third ever 100-yard game in 91 NFL games. So that kind of shows his upside.
It only takes one, buddy.
That was big for him. That's right. Vance McDonald is another guy who's really interesting against this Falcons defense that has lost its middle linebacker and both of its starting safeties. Tyler Eifert was going to just have a monster week last week. Unfortunately, he didn't play in the second half because he suffered a season-ending injury. But Vance McDonald played a season-high 63% of the snaps last week. He ran, I believe, 30 routes compared to 13 for Jesse James. So, and this is the way that the Steelers want it. They know that Vance McDonald is their superior receiving tight end and that Jesse James is the superior blocking tight end. And although Jesse James had those nice games early in the season, when Vance McDonald was still rounding into form, Vance McDonald is ready to go. And he is another interesting guy, like another dart throw in this likely shootout. What stood out to me about the Falcons last week is that they are searching in the secondary. They know that they have problems. They reshuffled their entire secondary, okay? So they've lost both of their starting safeties. They moved their slot corner, Brian Poole, to strong safety. Their new starting free safety replacing Ricardo Allen is DeMonte KZ, fifth-round pick last year. They had Robert Alford shadow A.J. Green at times. They moved Desmond Trufant to slot corner, and they started Isaiah Oliver, second-round pick, as the other cornerback. And did it work? No, it did not work. Andy Dalton, 350 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns. The Falcons have allowed the quarterback 1, the quarterback 7, and the quarterback 8 over the last 3 weeks. So, this is all systems go for Antonio Brown, Juju, Ben, Vance McDonald, James Conner, I think is in an awesome spot. What really has hurt James Conner over the past few weeks is just falling behind on the scoreboard. And his rushing attempts are way down. He has not been particularly efficient, although he's averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Le'Veon Bell only averaged 4.0 yards per carry last year. But he has been heavily involved in the passing game. He's got 21 targets so far this season, or he is 4th among running backs in targets, and we know that the Falcons just hemorrhage that receiving production to opposing running backs. And without Grady Jarrett, a massive difference maker in the middle of the Falcons' interior defensive line, that the run game matchup also improves.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you're playing anybody on Pittsburgh, I kind of think you're fine. You play Connor, it's a great spot. Antonio Juju, Vance McDonald, Evan mentioned him, phenomenal spots. I even think you can throw a few darts at James Washington. Saw 5 targets last week at 3.5K. I mean, he's one way to get some really cheap exposure to this Pittsburgh team. And, we see it all the time. Reeves, like, Antonio, he's going to be 30%. Juju might be 20%. James Washington will be 5% still, though.
Yeah, I mean, these are your types of guys where you circle these games. You get these late rounds. I do like Sanu though. I mean, I don't expect him to go for 100 yards, but I mean, when you're looking at on DK, especially where he's 4K, he's a jam. He's a guy that can let you jam in some guys that you want in your lineup. And I don't know. Evan probably knows more than me because I haven't really run down all the injury stuff today. But the Steelers lost Mike Hilton last week. I don't know if he had practiced today, but his replacement Cameron Sutton got torched up last week. He didn't give up a monster game, but like for a guy for 4K, he allowed all 6 targets to be completed in the slot, to Willie Snead and change there. So, I mean, Sanu's a guy I think can still get his way to, 12 to 15 points. If he finds the end zone, then you're looking at, extra gravy. I like Vance a lot just based on the tight end landscape. Obviously Gronk's either not going to play or be on Thursday. It doesn't matter. So we're really down to like Ertz and Kelsey. We're going to talk about Kelsey in a little bit. And then after that, it's just a wasteland at tight end. And you look at Vance, his last 5 games played with Ben Roethlisberger, he had 5 for 62, 4 for 112. His first game back, he only had the 3 for 26. Then he had 10 for 112, 4 for 52, 4 for 52. Just kind of really safe, stable floor for what you're going to pay for at the tight end position. We know the passing volume is going to be there. Like you said, it's pretty easy. It's easy with the Steelers because we know where the ball goes. Like those 4 guys get the ball. That's why we like their offense. Atlanta started to spread it around now the past 3 weeks, and Matt Ryan's taken off, exponentially. He's got 29 fantasy points or more in each of the past 3 weeks. The Steelers have allowed a QB1 performance in every game this season, all 4 games. So, I mean, Matt Ryan's another guy we can go back to, but obviously his price has jumped over those weeks. We were just soaking in those, 29 points. But yeah, I think it's just everyone is wheels up. I think the cheapies, like you guys nailed, I think are Vance and Mohamed Sanu. And then you said if you want to go really deep in the well, it's James Washington.
Yeah, and on this Atlanta side, Evan, like Reeves was saying, they're spreading around a little bit more. Devontae Freeman, he's going to be back this week. He's 6.5K over on DraftKings. Austin Hooper, we talked about tight end being kind of a no man's land. He's only 3K. Do either of these guys interest you, Evan?
Devontae Freeman, before he got hurt, and he re-injured an injury that he's been dealing with since last December. Before he went down, they were using him in almost an even rotation with Tevin Coleman. So that's something to keep in mind. He's not just going to jump back into, the way that he used to out-touch Tevin Coleman, when Kyle Shanahan was the OC. I mean, it was like an even rotation. And he's been dealing with this injury for almost a full calendar year at this point. So the backfield, I think, I think that Tevin Coleman would actually be the guy to throw a dart at. No one's going to play him because Devontae Freeman is back. He would be the guy to probably take a chance on in that backfield. Austin Hooper, 23rd among tight ends in air yards, 19th in targets among tight ends. So, he's just been a touchdown or bust guy. With that said, the Steelers have been getting crushed by tight ends in each of the last 3 weeks. That's no surprise due to their problems at inside linebacker and safety. So the matchup is definitely good, but he doesn't get a lot of targets. They don't throw to him downfield. But hey, he does have, a touchdown and 60 yards in his potential range of outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, the ceiling's probably 20 points. And if you do that, if he hits that, you're obviously doing backflips. But at 3K, I'm willing to roll the dice, especially if Vance McDonald, who I like more. Don't get me wrong. Vance McDonald's 3.7K, Austin Hooper 3K, and Vance McDonald might be 4 or 5 times as heavily owned as Hooper. So I'm willing to roll the dice on both. All right, let's move on to the next game. It's Jacksonville at Kansas City. Total of 49. Kansas City Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites. And I'll tell you what, people were talking in the chat. They were saying, oh, Matt Ryan chalk week. Ben Roethlisberger chalk week. Reeves, you know who the chalk this week's going to be, don't you?
I'm scared, man. I'm scared for him. I'm scared, man, because I think when you start looking at the Chiefs, because I was someone that for streaming options was like, yeah, just go ahead and just plug and play Case Keenum, it'll be fine. But I think when you look under the hood of what the Chiefs have done, so now if you go into their games, like they really didn't give up any production into the Chargers until the second half, and that some of that was self-induced by the Chargers. Then they play the shootout with Pittsburgh. Then the 49ers don't really do anything until it's jailbreak time, and they don't really put up any production until it's just wheels are off. And then, last week they played pretty well. And the other thing, too, about the Chiefs I started to look at, they're actually really good on a per-target basis, like against wide receivers. They're just getting bludgeoned with volume, which is pretty interesting. And we saw neither guy kind of pop when the volume didn't go crazy last week against them. That's kind of interesting. They're fourth in points allowed to wide receivers per target. The problem is that they've just faced most pass attempts in the NFL, and that'll catch up to you no matter what your efficiency is. So I'm kind of interested. Plus, Blake Bortles is like, what the hell is Blake Bortles? This dude looks like the best quarterback in the NFL 2 of the 4 weeks, and then he's got 376 passing yards, 388 passing yards. Then he's got 155 passing yards and 176 passing yards. We don't know what this offense wants to be week to week. They haven't figured out what kind of identity they want to play with. A lot of people bring up the Fournette stats with and without Fournette. Evan brought those up a few weeks ago and talked about being leery of them, and Bortles came out and laid a complete egg. Did absolutely nothing that week. So it becomes kind of sketchy. I think that obviously he's an upside play. There's upside here if this game shoots out based on what we've seen the Chiefs do the first month of the season. Bortles can run. He's getting you 3.5 rushing points per game. You're going to get that sprinkled in. But I think there's a lower floor here than people think for cash games. And I think especially on DK, when you've got a guy like Matt Stafford, like 200 above him, and a guy like Derek Carr, 300 below him, I think those guys offer a lot more stability, in terms of what they're going to produce, yardage and touchdown wise than what you're going to get from Blake Bortles. But I understand why everyone's excited for Blake Bortles this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird when everybody's excited for Blake Bortles. That should not be a sentence that people use. And I'll tell you what, here's another knock against Bortles this week. And obviously we're still a ways out. The weather looks awful in this game. I'm not sure if you guys seen the weather, but it's just supposed to be storming essentially all afternoon. It's almost 100% chance of rain right at kickoff. And after that, it goes down to like 70%. So, I mean, there might be some weather concerns here also, which means maybe more TJ Yeldon. Evan, how do you feel about Blake Bortles chalk week?
I was planning to play him in tournaments, but if he's going to be the chalk, then it sounds like, maybe not play him in tournaments. One thing I do like about him is the rushing component, because we have so far seen, the Chiefs historically under Bob Sutton have played a lot of man coverage, and they've been highly vulnerable to because, in man coverage, like the defenders turn their back to the quarterback. And so that leaves a lot of holes in the middle of the field that a running quarterback can exploit. And we have not seen that exploited against them because they play like Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger and like Case Keenum, so we have not seen them play a big-time rushing quarterback. And Blake Bortles is third among quarterbacks in rushing yards right now, behind Cam Newton and Deshaun Watson. So that was one thing that I really liked when looking at this game, working in Blake Bortles' favor. When Leonard Fournette has been out, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, being leery of it because he had played a ton of terrible defenses. When you're just looking at the raw stats and you're not considering any context. And then he went out and played the Titans, who through 4 weeks, it looked like they weren't going to be a good defense like early on, but they are a good defense. And you look at their, in terms of their production, and then you look at their personnel, and, it makes sense that they would be a good defense. But Blake Bortles, independently in that game, he was awful independently in that game. But this Chiefs defense is, I think, legitimately bad. If you look at when Leonard Fournette has been out over the past 2 seasons, Blake Bortles has averaged 65.4 more passing yards and 0.53 more passing scores when Leonard Fournette sits. So you combine that with what I think can be a highly productive rushing game here for Blake Bortles. And again, I was going to play him in tournaments, but if everyone's going to be on him, then maybe I should look elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be higher than 15% or anything, but I do think that a lot of people, and he's one of those guys, look, he's going to gain steam this week as more people are building lineups, especially just 5.5K. People are going to look at the skilled guys from Pittsburgh, from that other team, Atlanta, and they're going to say, well, God, I can't fit him in there. So 5.5K for Blake Bortles, I'll do that. Now, Reeves, a lot of these other plays from Jacksonville, they're also really, really cheap. Obviously, Evan mentioned Leonard Fournette. He's out. TJ Yeldon, he's sitting there at 5.6K. Plus all these receivers. Keelan Cole, 4.9. Dante Moncrief, 4.1. D.D. Westbrook, 4.7. So, look, if you think this Chiefs defense is bad, and guess what it is, Like, there are a lot of different ways that you can go here, Reeves.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of Evan's point about Bortles, he faced the Bob Sutton defense once, and he ran for 54 yards in that game. So, I mean, yeah, if you can get an extra touchdown and a half with passing, that's obviously worth a squeeze as well. But, yeah, I mean, you look at – obviously Yeldon's going to be a popular guy this week. I mean, he's been a top 20 back in 3 of the 4 games. He's had 90 yards from scrimmage and 100 yards of scrimmage the past 2 weeks. The Chiefs really are where they're the worst at is against the run. They just keep scripting teams out of the run. If you look at that game Monday night, I mean, the Broncos took themselves out of it because they stopped the running, but they were just running down their throats. They've allowed 202 yards from scrimmage to running backs per game. That's 31st. They are allowing the most fantasy rushing points per rushing attempt in the NFL. So if teams can ever stick with the run, and Jacksonville's a team that can play good enough defense to stick with it, obviously that's going to be an advantage. Plus, Yeldon's not going to be scripted out. It'll be interesting to see if Corey Grant gets any type of like workload like he did in that Week 2 game when Fournette was clearly out. When he played, I think he had 10 touches that game, because he's a guy that can do a little bit off 10 touches, kind of like how Matt Breida did when he was in and out of that game versus the Chiefs. But like you said, if it's going to be sloppy, it's going to be interesting. Yeldon will be the popular guy. As far as the receivers go, it's a little sketchy because it's kind of been, hit or miss with a lot of these guys. It's starting to thin out where like Keelan Cole's clearly the third guy. And then Moncrief is like the more downfield red zone guy. And then D.D. Westbrook's the guy that wants to get the target value out of the slot. D.D. Westbrook also got the Buster Screen bump last week. So, I mean, listen, you can circle every week whoever's facing Buster Screen at this point and look to get him into lineups.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites this week, too.
Manny Sanders.
Yeah, it's one of our favorites.
Buster Screen is getting absolutely annihilated. They've allowed 20 or more points now to 3 different slot receivers, and the only one he didn't was Albert Wilson, who he also gave up a touchdown to. But back on the beating path to how that goes into here, I think that Moncrief has the best individual matchup, if that's your thing. Orlando Scantrick is probably the worst of the 3 guys to attack. Moncrief, like I said, is getting the downfield targets. I think he's got like the highest ceiling. Like he can do the most on like 4 catches out of these guys. Whereas Westbrook, the guy that had the points last week, maybe there's some chasing. He faces off more individually with the best of the 3 guys in Kendall Fuller. But I mean, yeah, I think that it's hit or miss. I would probably rank them Moncrief, Westbrook, and Cole as it pertains to this week for the pass catchers. But I think with Bortles' rushing, you can play him blind too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually think you can definitely play him blind. Not like Reed said, the rushing upside's there. Keelan Cole's a guy that a lot of people want to play and just hasn't gotten there. And of course, if Moncrief's going to be popular, which I think he is, Westbrook's going to be popular, which I think he is. Evan, you know what that means, right?
DJ Shark.
It's Keelan Cole Day, baby.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I like all of them. The guy I don't like is Dante Moncrief, but like his usage is extraordinary. I mean, he gets all the air yards. I mean, he is dominating air yards.
Yeah.
In their offense. He has the best profile as a red zone receiver. He's just not someone that I can bring myself to play. I like D.D. Westbrook the best. He leads the team in targets. The Chiefs have given up the most 20-plus yard completions in the NFL, and he has 6 20-plus yard receptions this year. He won the friggin' Biletnikoff Award in college. He was 4th in the Heisman voting. He's got like the best pedigree and, the best production so far in the Jaguars pass catcher core. And in weeks 1 and 2, at least, Keenan Allen and Juju Smith-Schuster had like their best games as, primary slot receivers against the Chiefs. The slot receivers have been a little bit more quiet against the Chiefs lately. But I think that I like D.D. Westbrook the best, but I think that they're all very, very much playable. And, hey, whoever, if you can pin down the guy that has the big week, and I think it's very likely that at least one guy has a big week, you're going to end up making the money. I just, I think it's, 35% D.D. Westbrook, 33%, Dante Moncrief, and maybe 31% Keelan Cole.
Yeah, but you hate Dante Moncrief, so you can go under 30.
Right. Yeah,
True. On the other side, to me, the other side of this game's more interesting. Yeah, the Jags, guess what? Great matchup. They're too cheap. A lot of people are going to play them against this defense. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, they're at home. They're favored. And I don't think anybody's going to play these Chiefs guys because they're facing a Jaguars defense that is obviously one of the elite defenses in all of football. But these Chiefs guys, they're really priced down this week because the matchup. Mahomes, he's all the way down to 6.2. Kareem Hunt got it going last week, 5.8. Tyreek Hill, 6.9. Watkins, 4.8. Travis Kelce is only 6K. And Reeves, I can't help but think that people are going to play these Jags guys, but they're going to ignore this Chiefs side, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, we kind of were in a similar spot to this last year. Not quite apples to apples because the Chiefs have been so good. But there was a week where the Seahawks were ripping and Russ was ripping points. And when he went to Jacksonville and got priced down, and everyone was kind of just like, what do we do with Russ this week? This guy's been on fire. And we're kind of in a similar spot. The Jaguars have been really good. Obviously, we inherently know they're a really good defense dating back to last year. They faced a just bucket load, if you go down their schedule, of just terrible quarterbacks too. That's not to say that they're bad. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Jags defense, but a lot of the better quarterbacks they have played and still have had productive fantasy games against them. So far this year, they faced Eli Manning. They faced Brady. They faced Mariota when he was playing left-handed, and they faced Sam Darnold last week. Not exactly a rogues gallery that you're scared of. Obviously, we know they're good. I'm not trying to say that they've been completely matchup induced, but they're not. They're facing an exponentially better offense this week. And Mahomes is a guy that can move. He can get on his own. He finally ran a little bit last week, and he counterpunched. The Broncos had the Chiefs. Their game plan was awesome, and the fourth quarter of that game, Mahomes took over on his own. So we've seen him counterpunch now within a game where he was beaten, and they came back and and turned the tides there. I think Tyreek Hill is really interesting this week because when you look at any of the receivers that have posted big games on the Jaguars, they've only allowed 400-yard games since the start of last year, but they've been to Antonio Brown twice, Odell Beckham, and Brandon Cooks. They also are a team that will mix in a lot of cover 3. And remember, Russ got them in a lot of cover. Like Tyler Lockett caught a bomb for a touchdown. Paul Richardson. They move Tyreek Hill around. Like he'll get some vertical shots from the slot. They're just not going to line Tyreek Hill up. He's not that kind of receiver where he'll just line up against Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, repeatedly. They're going to move him around. He's going to get touches. So I think he's really, really interesting this week because the raw speed guys that have faced the Jaguars have given them a little bit of trouble at times. So I think he's really interesting. I'm not really interested in Watkins. It's just the ancillary piece. Kelsey's kind of in probably just a contrarian play. The Jaguars have faced Gronk and Evan Ingram and nuked both of those guys. They didn't do anything. Obviously, Kelsey's is getting double-digit targets in 3 straight games. You're not going to fade Kelsey in a season long, and you're going to mix him in some tournament lineups. But I think that Tyreek Hill is probably the guy I'm most interested in. I know Evan's going to bring up them home splits.
I mean, I want to say something about, Kelsey too. Like you brought up Gronk, Evan Ingram. Okay, fine. Like he didn't do anything, but I'm not like Evan Ingram. I can't put him in that category. Gronk, though, they were just double teaming because, the best Patriots receiver at the time was Chris Hogan. Like they just got to double team Gronk. They can't do that against the Chiefs. Not with Kareem Hunt, not with Tyreek Hill, not with they just can't do that. So to me, Travis Kelce might be my favorite tournament play on the entire slate where everybody is going to pay down at tight end. All right, Evan, I know you wanted to get to you to those home road splits. Let's go for it.
No, I only bring up Tyreek's home road splits when he's on the road. When he's at home, I don't say, you can't play him. I don't say that. The Mahomes and Tyreek Hill can do things that are legitimately indefensible on the football field. So like these and it's very much like Russ when he had that good game against Jacksonville last year. I mean, at that time, Russell Wilson was doing things that were indefensible on the football field, and Pat Mahomes, to even a greater extent, has the ability to do things that a defense just straight up can't stop. I mean, and so does Tyreek Hill. I mean, no one can run as fast as Tyreek Hill in the NFL, and you give Pat Mahomes time in the pocket to go run around a little bit. Like no one can cover Tyreek Hill for 8 seconds. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
absolutely, they can still get theirs, and they're very interesting tournament plays. And I think that that is the way to go. It would just be Mahomes to Tyreek, and then maybe bring it back with one of the Jaguars receivers that we talked about.
Or TJ Yeldon at 5. I mean, look, TJ Yeldon, I understand he's kind of a cash play and he's cheap and everybody's going to play him. That doesn't make him a bad play. I mean, TJ Yeldon's a great play this week, and I think you can pair him with Bortles. By the way, we've seen him catch some balls. I have no problem with that. All right, anybody else we need to touch on in this game, Evan? What do you think about Kareem Hunt?
It was nice to see him get involved in the passing game last week, but I think that you need to take his rushing line with a grain of salt, because it was very, very clear from the outset of the game all the way to the end that the Broncos were not going to give up deep balls to the Chiefs, and they were going to almost like encourage the Chiefs to run the ball on them. And I think that was a smart strategy. But I don't think that the Jaguars are going to do that. The Jaguars aren't like a game plan defense. The Jaguars play, sort of the same way every single week, and they have the talent to execute, and they're like, you come beat us, and they have been really shutting down the run. They don't give up anything to running backs in the passing game either. So I think that he would be very much in the same like the same conversation as Travis Kelce, where he's a good player. There's nothing about the matchup that stands out. And at the end of the day, like, people aren't going to play him, so he's going to be low owned. This game might, have some decent scoring in it, and he could potentially benefit. But there's nothing about the matchup, specifically that stands out for him. And trying to chase last week's big game, I think that's not the smartest, because that production was specific to that week and that game plan by Denver.
All right, let's move on to Minnesota at Philly. It's a 45.5 total. Philly at home, they're 3-point favorites. And real quick, let's talk about the Minnesota side, because I think they're gonna attack this Philly side through the air. The problem is they're all pretty expensive. Both Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, they're over $7K this week. Kirk Cousins, he is over $6K. So Reeves, what are you looking at with this Vikings team?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the trifecta that you're looking at. I think that those guys will probably slip through a little bit too, because I think a lot of people want to chase that point total in that Atlanta game for sure, because they've saw how profitable those Atlanta games have been recently. But I think there was some concern earlier, like coming into the season, at least from like season-long analysts, were like, well, Kirk Cousins has been on like some mediocre teams, like his value might take a little hit this year. He's going to be on a good team attached to a good defense for the first time in his career. He might have to do a lot on 50 to 60 less pass attempts. And the Vikings have come out and been a way worse team than anyone has thought that they would be. And Kirk Cousins is just winging the ball around all over every game. They can't run the football at all. They are dead last in creating yards before contact for their running backs, no matter who it's been in the backfield. They've been game scripted out of running the ball the past 3 weeks. That's probably something that will happen again. And if they wanted to run here, they couldn't, because the Eagles are the best run defense in the NFL dating back to last year. Teams try to run the football on the Eagles the least amount since the start of last season. So, I mean, it's just siphoning right in to just be a high-volume Kirk Cousins game. And when Kirk Cousins is going to be high volume, it's largely going to 2 to 3 people, because they've actually made Kyle Rudolph back to a receiving tight end first. He's running routes on more of a snaps than almost double the rate he was last year. So he's still been back in the fold. Only him and Ertz are the guys that have had tight end 1 weeks in all 4 games this season. So he's in play still too. I think he's actually pretty affordable on both sites. Probably not going to get a lot of burn. But yeah, it's really just those guys. The Eagles have been so bad to wide receivers dating back to last year, and it's rolled right into this year. Top receivers have just roasted them. Like the Titans offense, we talked about it the week before. Like, we just couldn't play those guys because based on what they had shown. And Mariota comes out, wins Offensive Player of the Week. He has almost 400 total yards of offense. Corey Davis was unable to get anything going the first 3 weeks. Comes and has his best game of his NFL career. It's just, they're facing Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs now, 2 of the best, wide receivers in the league, as a combo. And Kirk Cousins, I feel like Kirk Cousins is really going to go under-owned because people aren't going to play him. If you look at like where Kirk Cousins is ranked in the industry right now, he's universally ranked as a QB2, which is really odd. This week he's ranked outside of the top 12 this week. If you go to Fantasy Pros to see, that's how it was this morning. I have to double check and make sure, see if the world hasn't come around and grasped grasp just what's happening. But I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a really big line this week, even if it's not a great, sexy, real-life NFL game.
I'll tell you what is going to be sexy, especially if you're playing him, what Stephon Diggs is going to do to Jalen Mills. Evan, talk to me about that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Jalen Mills, although it was majority Jalen Mills last week. But I mean, the Titans got Corey Davis matched up at times against Avonte Maddox, rookie, I think 4th round pick, who has been playing safety in place of Rodney McLeod, who's out with an MCL injury. And Avonte Maddox, like after the game, he's like, he gets all burnt up, and he's like, I never played safety in my life. He played cornerback, in college, and they drafted him as a cornerback, but they're like desperate at safety, and they play a lot of 3 safety looks. So, and he's out there like matched up against Corey Davis. He was supposed to be really a slot corner, but it was a really disadvantageous situation for Avonte Maddox. But you're right, Jalen Mills has just been getting dusted. He's been getting dusted for years. I mean, it's I like the Eagles fans swear that he's good, and like we know he's not good. But the Eagles fans always like had his back, and now I think finally they're starting to realize, hey, this dude, like, he gives up a lot of production, and that's not good when you play cornerback in the NFL. And Jim Schwartz is starting to get their defensive coordinator starting to get asked in post-game press conference, like, hey, think about benching Jalen Mills yet? And I don't know if they really have any other good options. Rasul Douglas, maybe they could look at, but he got torched in the preseason. So they're kind of like out of options, and that bodes well for Stephon Diggs. I think Kirk Cousins is going to end up throwing the ball 50 times in this game, because there's no way that the Vikings are going to run the ball. First of all, the Vikings can't run the ball at all. Second of all, they're not running the ball on the Eagles, who have the best run defense in the league. They're going to need to throw the rock to move it. And Kirk Cousins becomes a very interesting tournament play.
Yeah, you mentioned Jalen Mills. All the guy does is give up big plays, and for whatever reason, people haven't caught on. And I'm thrilled with it every week, because I remember one of my biggest weeks last year was I got Odell. He was projected to be shadowed by Jalen Mills, and I was like, well, this is going to be fun. And he blew up in that game. It's just a spot that a lot of people don't look toward, especially against these kind of big play guys. And Diggs is one of those guys. I think he's going to absolutely light Mills up this week. All right, Reeves. Philly side, we've got Corey Clement. He's a little bit banged up. The Philly running game, I mean, J.H.I. 5.1K. Is that cheap enough to get you on board?
Oh, man. No. I want to be with you, but I can't. Because the one thing the Vikings actually are doing well is playing the run like pretty well. They're 6th in just rushing points, a lot of the backfields. They haven't a lot of rushing touchdown to a running back yet this year. Maybe you can just play that and say they're due. But, I mean, I'm really liking Ertz. Obviously, it's not any rocket science to say you like Zach Ertz. There have only been 3 players that have double-digit targets every game this season, and 2 are in this game: Adam Thielen and Zach Ertz. The Vikings have only played 2 good tight ends so far in the season, Jimmy Graham and George Kittle, and they both had really good games against them. So, I mean, I like the idea of, getting Cousins and giving him both wide receivers and giving him Zach Ertz and going that route and building out from there. And probably going over the field on those guys, because like Evan said, I don't think either team is going to be able to run the ball well in this game. The Eagles might run it more in default because they will be able to probably control script a little more, and they can run a little better. But this is a game that sets up for probably a lot of passing on both sides. What that means for the Eagles receivers outside of Zach Ertz is to be determined. I mean, it was nice that Alshon came back and balled early in that game. Wentz played really good in the front half of that game. They started to really, really look like the Eagles from last year, and then they just went dormant, just did nothing the rest of the game. They had a chance to put that game away, and they just didn't. They were up 17-3 early, had a chance to put their foot on the throats, and just couldn't. So this team just really hasn't gotten clicking yet altogether. No one's really going to want to play Wentz, but the Vikings defense has been kind of bad to – the Eagles are kind of the team that ruined the Vikings last year in the NFC Championship. It's kind of when this all started. I mean, you can point to the second half before, maybe that Saints game, but ever since that Eagles game where they just waxed them in the NFC Championship game, like the Vikings have just not been the same defense since. The personnel is still there. I want to still believe that they're going to be a good defense, and Mike Zimmer will get this right given the talent that they have. But right now they've been vulnerable, and they've been vulnerable to a lot of players that we wouldn't think they should be vulnerable to, like Josh Allen.
I mean, to be fair, the University of Arkansas shouldn't be vulnerable to Josh Allen, but here we are. You mentioned Alshon. He's back, played really well last week. He's just 6.2K over on DraftKings. Evan, how do you feel about this Philly offense?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get the Xavier Rhodes treatment, but Xavier Rhodes hadn't been that great this year so far. And
don't tell people. Everybody still thinks Xavier Rhodes is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, he should match up well with Alshon, though. Theoretically, this is the exact type of receiver that he should be able to slow down. But when they matched up in the NFC Championship game last January, I mean, there were 3 targets that went into Alshon's direction with Xavier Rhodes on him. He caught all 3. The cornerback receiver matchups, I think, over the years and really, putting a lot of time into them. And, they're definitely fun to talk about, and I like them to break ties, but they don't mean a whole lot. If we're going to get Alshon Jeffrey for 9 to 11 targets, we're playing him. Because all it really takes is for him to catch like 4 or 5 and score a touchdown or 2. And that's what Alshon Jeffrey's game is. It's really scoring touchdowns. I mean, dude had, less than 800 yards last year, but he had 9 touchdowns, had a bunch of touchdowns in the playoffs. That's what Alshon does. Nelson Aguilar, I think, is really, really interesting this week because there's a narrative that he has been struggling because he's been playing outside. But he hasn't been playing outside. He's actually been playing in the slot more over the past 2 weeks than he did in the first couple weeks. And now and last week the reason that he failed in week 3 was because he only got 5 targets. They used a very tight end heavy game plan. Dallas Goedert, had that breakout game. And Nelson Aguilar only got, 5 looks, and no one's going to do anything with 5 looks. Last week, Nelson Aguilar dropped 3 balls, and Wentz missed them for early in the game, a big potential touchdown. He went up against one of the better slot corners in the league, Logan Ryan, and he had 12 targets, and he didn't have a lot of production. And now he's going up against the Vikings, and that's their weakness in terms of cornerback wide receiver matchups is in the slot. It's mostly Mackenzie Alexander. But really what is most important is that Nelson Aguilar has double-digit targets in 3 of the 4 games, okay? And that people are not going to play him because they think he's playing outside and he can't win outside, but he's really playing in the slot. He can win in the slot. So I think that he is a really, really interesting play, especially if you want to kind of bet on Xavier Rhodes to take away Alshon. And Dallas Goedert to likely remain a non-factor. I mean, their other receiver in 3 receiver sets is Jordan Matthews, and that's a dude who can't win outside. There's a guy who can't win outside. He has 5 targets over the last 2 games. Aguilar has 17. So
I prefer the guy with 17 targets. I'm just saying.
Right. But the Vikings have also been getting killed by tight ends, so I think that Ertz is really interesting. He has double-digit targets in all 4 games, but he has no touchdowns. So I think he's second among tight ends in red zone targets. I mean, he is, for lack of a better term, due to hit pay dirt against the Vikings.
I'll tell you what, I kind of mentioned this with Travis Kelce. Everybody's going to pay down at tight end this week. I think the Kelce's and the Ertz, those guys are really, really interesting for tournaments and are just going to be almost completely unowned. All right, let's move on and talk some of our favorite quarterbacks. A lot of them, look, we've already talked about. We talked about Blake Bortles. We talked about Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger. Those guys, of course, we like. Kirk Cousins as well. Reeves, who are some of the other quarterbacks you're looking at this week, though?
I'm really into Matthew Stafford this week. He's at home. The Packers are kind of banged up all around. Jair Alexander did get a limited practice today, and Kevin King might come back as well. But those aren't guys that are really typically a move. You'd rather them be out, but they're not guys you're really scared about going against the Lions, receiving core. So I really like Stafford at home. He's got a really good history of really torching the Packers. I know that Dom Capers isn't there anymore, but really, really long running history of him having a lot of success against that team. like him. I like Derek Carr a little bit just for where he's priced. I mean, you know what's funny is I sent a tweet out last week talking about Derek Carr is due for a buy low. He's due for a bounce back. But I even wrote it up. I was like, it's not going to be this week because the Browns, they limited Drew Brees, they limited Ben Roethlisberger. It's going to be just a wait. Just the Derek Carr's been kind of like a sleeping giant. He's throwing for all these yards, but the touchdowns haven't come yet. And then last week he just goes bananas and kind of ruins that. But he's super cheap, and the Chargers have been bad. Like, this is like back to the old Chargers. They haven't been able to roll over that defensive success they had last year, especially in the passing game. They're 30th in yards per completion allowed. They almost messed around and lost to C.J. Beathard last week. Like, there was like a legitimate – there was like legitimate like a game for a while, and there's a chance the 49ers win that game. But those are the only two guys, other than the guys we hit upon. I like Cousins a lot. I like mixing in Bortles for like tournament play. And obviously, if you can fit Ben and Matt Ryan in, those are the smash guys.
Yeah, it's just really hard to fit him in. I think Cam Newton at home at 6.4K against the Giants, he's interesting. And again, he's going to be 2 or 3% owned. You mentioned Matt Stafford. Aaron Rodgers on the other side of that game is fine. Phillip Rivers at home against the Raiders, I think they're fine. I'll tell you what, here's an interesting, let's say the people out there are playing the Thursday, Sunday slate, because Matt Stafford obviously in a really good spot. Andrew Luck also, he plays the Patriots. Evan, who would you rather have, Stafford or Luck this week?
Oh, Stafford for sure.
All right, let me change my season-long lineup. All right, take care of that.
I mean,
I think Luck just threw 60 passes and is playing 3 days later.
The issue is that that's true. He's second in the NFL.
Jacoby Brissett's got to come out there for 3rd and 15 this week.
I mean, he needs a middle reliever. They need the middle reliever this game.
Luck is going to throw the ball 50 times again on Thursday. So I think that, you are going to get a lot of volume from him. And it could be a situation where Patriots kind of crush them, but they end up putting up, 20 plus points just because, they're trying to rally back. And the Patriots defense isn't good. That's not something that, you got to worry about. I definitely think that Luck can have a good game, but in terms of, like this game, certainly at Ford Field, it'll be played indoors. I don't think that the Packers secondary matches up well with the Lions receiver core. All those guys, I think, are in position for potentially big games. And that game really has a chance to be like a true back and forth. Whereas I think that with Luck, you're kind of hoping that, things just kind of go right for you in the second half, and you're playing with one of your hands tied behind your back because he doesn't have Jack Doyle or T.Y. Hilton, whereas Matthew Stafford has his full arsenal. So that's how I would break that tie. I mean, I really think it's like 53-47. But I think that 53 would be with Matthew Stafford.
One thing that Ray brought up on our show that we recorded today is that teams that play on Thursday that just played an overtime game, and particularly a long overtime game, are horrendous on Thursday nights. They're like 6-25 against the spread historically. They just come out and they just play terribly. And you're removing T.Y. Hilton and you're removing Jack Doyle again. Yeah. I think it's a tough spot. Plus the Patriots, I think it's a spot where the Patriots don't hit their total, especially if Gronk doesn't play. I mean, you look at Brady splits with and without Gronk, and last year he was the QB 17, the QB 23 in those two games. He throws for 30 yards fewer a game. His average yards per pass attempt without Gronk since Gronk joined the team is just 6.8 yards. That's like a regular dude.
It's weird talking about Brady as a regular dude. All right, let's talk some running backs. Obviously we like the guys that we talked about earlier. A couple other names to mention. Melvin Gordon at home against the Raiders. I mean, he's somebody that I'm not sure he'll be terribly popular just because the people are paying up. They'll get to Gurley or they'll save a little bit of money. But, I mean, big-time home favorite. The Raiders stink against the run. Evan, who are some of the other running backs you're looking at?
We talked about a lot of RBs in good games. Why don't you take this one first, Reeves? Because I'm gonna take a second here to look down the chart.
How are you guys feeling about Matt Breida this week? Anything? I mean, Mike Davis just came off the streets and ran for 120 yards. They're facing our most value. Yeah, Evan saw him in them streets. They brought him in. 120 yards, 2 tugs. Matthew Breida ran his season high in pass routes last week, starting to get a little more work. I know Alf was banged up. He out-touched Alf 12-5 in that game. the Cardinals have just, and it's part of it's script induced, but they are facing the most rushing attempts, the most rushing volume, and most backfield touches per game. We brought it up list on the show last week. We were talking about Chris Carson. He caught that inactive, but substitute Mike Davidson for Chris Carson. You saw how that apples to apples that applies. I think Matthew Breida is pretty interesting. I think he's going to get popular as the week goes on and more work is done. He'll be a guy that starts to shine a little bit. I tried in the text messages. I didn't get Evan's response. Any chance I can coax you guys into a Derrick Henry week?
Let me think. No. Sure, I thought about it. Look, okay, I get what you're saying. The Bills, they are a run funnel. It's a 39-point total, though. I mean, it's coming. Look, there is going to be a Derrick Henry week. Like, it just happens once or twice a year. It even happened when DeMarco Murray was ahead of him. I'm probably not going to be on it, but if it happens this week against the Bills, yeah, Reeves, I get it. How's that for an endorsement?
Hey, man, listen, that's about as good as I can make. I mean, all I can say is if you look at the volume that he's getting when his splits by the scoreboard, because he's just been they've compartmentalized his backfield. He has 32% of the team opportunity share when they're tied or leading. In the 2 weeks prior, he didn't do anything, but he had 18 touches each week. You give him 18 touches in a game where you tell me I'm getting 18 touches and he's 5,800 and 4,400. I'm probably going to mix him in against the defense that's allowed 7 touchdowns to running backs. I'm not saying that you have to go out and play Derrick Henry. I'm just saying there's some things that point me along the way of having some exposure to him.
Yeah, it sounds like the week that I played Derrick Henry, then Deion Lewis puts up a 30-burger. I've seen this movie before, and I did not enjoy it. Evan, okay, who else do you got at running back? Because I don't think I could take another second of Derrick Henry talk.
I'll just throw out Christian McCaffrey. Giants have given up 130 or more rushing yards in 3 of their 4 games. They gave up over 6 yards per carry to Saints RBs last week, 3 rushing scores. They've also given up at least 5 catches to running backs in all 4 of their games. The Panthers' offensive line has just been kicking butts and taking names, and that's without their stud right guard, Trey Turner. He has been out with a concussion. He will be back after missing 2 games, just blowing holes in the middle of interior defensive lines. Christian McCaffrey has been outstanding. Here's another guy who's due for some positive touchdown regression. He has been getting the ball and has been in the game, close in scoring position, except Cam scrambled a few in, and CJ Anderson ripped off this screen pass for a touchdown. He looked like Mike Tolbert. Like CJ Anderson he's been eating the meals that I've been eating recently. He's not looking too healthy. I love that you mentioned Cam earlier, because I think he is an awesome play, and you can of course play him in the same lineups with Christian McCaffrey.
I'm going to throw another name at you. It's a name that I tried to get you guys to play in last week, and you guys poo-pooed him a little bit too. Aaron Jones at the Lions. I think he's about to take over this Packers job. Evan, you were not too interested in Aaron Jones last week. Are you interested in him this week?
I mean, I love Aaron Jones, but they're going to play their other backs, I think. I mean, there may come a point where they just turn Aaron Jones loose, but Jamal Williams can pass protect, and Aaron Jones has pass protected so far well this year. And so that's important. And that may lead to him getting more work, but they really like Jamal Williams as a pass protector. And, there's a reason that they've been cutting the playing time into, thirds. And Ty Montgomery is good in the passing game. He made a big play in the passing game last week. So that is your concern. It's not the matchup. It's not Aaron Jones' talent. Is he going to get the workload? Look, that will be easier to say once it actually happens. And our job is to try to be out in front of this kind of stuff, so it's certainly not out of the question. There are reasons to believe that it could happen from a rational thinking standpoint, but we know what the deal is here. We need something to change in terms of the usage and the coach's decision making.
And by the way, you mentioned Ty Montgomery. He should have scored on that pass. And then also he might line up in the slot if Randall Cobb's out, if Geronimo Allison's out. I think Ty Montgomery's in play this week too. All right, real quick, let's touch on some wide receivers. I mentioned Randall Cobb. He might be out. Geronimo Allison, he's suffering from the concussion also, which means, Reeves, are you excited for the one, the only, Marquez Valdes-Scantling?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. The Packers situation is really rough, and the way Rodgers has played. That's why it's hard for me to keep going back to the well on Rodgers and keep saying like he's a guy that you have to keep thrusting in the lineups, because the situation's really not great for him. It's kind of deteriorating around him, and plus it sets up to where they might actually be able to run the football this week, a little bit, against the Lions. I mean, I think that game is pretty wildly, the spread is pretty crazy in that game because the Packers are actually favorites in that game. I kind of want to – I've already money-lined the Lions already. But I like the Lions in that game at home. I like Golden Tate in that game. Listen, Evan always likes to drop the phrase good at football. You know who's really good at football is Golden Tate. The dude's just really good. He can play anywhere. He plays in the slot. You saw him last week outside. He got 2 touchdowns outside. I want to ask Evan. I was thinking about this during the game last week, and I meant to text him, but he had a wedding. I couldn't, and I knew he was tied up. Ugh. Is Jeff Heath our new Chris Conte?
Oh yeah. Shoot, what happened? He got trucked last week, right?
He got trucked and got spins like Golden Tate juked him so bad. He didn't have a chance. Then carry on melted him.
That's right. Yeah. No, I like it. I love it.
All right. So, Evan, who are some of the wideouts that you're looking at this week?
Shoot, why do you always start with me, man?
I didn't. We just got done with Reeves.
I mean, I like I like Aguilar. Man, I have not been building
smoke, man.
I have not been building lineups early in the week, and this is my problem. This is why I can't come up with guys. Tyler Boyd, it sets up really well again for Tyler Boyd. Eifert out, probably Xavier Howard on AJ Green.
I like AJ Green.
Minkah Fitzpatrick has been great for the Dolphins, but they play a lot of zones, so it's not like he's going to be sticking to Tyler Boyd in man coverage in the slot. It really sets up well for him again. I think that Keenan Allen breaks out this week, with very little problem. First of all, Raiders have been getting killed in the slot, and Keenan Allen, I think that he's really high in Josh Hermsmeyer's buy low air yards model. Like that about him. He's been held to 70 yards or fewer and scoreless in 3 straight games. It's about time, for Keenan Allen. And that game, I think, has shootout potential. I think that this Raiders offense has really gotten better every single week. And this is a game with a 50. It's already been bet up. It started at 51, and it's moved up to 53.5 in terms of the total. So I think that game can shoot out. On that other side, you have to love Jared Cook, but we're obviously just talking about wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, just number of ways you can go this week. You mentioned AJ Green. I like him this week too against Miami. You mentioned they play that zone. I'm not concerned at all. I like AJ a lot. Guys, we got to get off here. We're running over, and the D train's got to get home. And I feel bad keeping him here late, so we're going to go ahead and jump off. Thank you so much to everybody for watching. Big thanks to Rich Rebar, Evan Silva, RotoWorld, joining me. For those two, for Kobe Fleener, I'm Eric Crane. We'll see you guys later. Peace.